Thomas Young, the English polymath who lived from 1773 to 1829, the last man, as I said, who knew everything, was no less than a genius. He deciphered parts of the Rosetta Stone, laid foundations for later work by Helmholtz, Einstein and others, established the wave theory of light in which he corrected the particle theory of Isaac Newton, and that list goes on and on. Young's collected works were posthumously published in 1855, and in those huge volumes available for anyone today online, one finds a very interesting article on music and on tempo in particular. Young's contribution on tempo in music is rather short, but as much to the point as it is surrounded with a certain mystery. Young wrote this article around 1800, in a time where the metronome was still not around, but the call for exact and reproducible tempi got louder and louder. Young proposed an apparently simple system in which the composer would give the numbers of bars he wanted in the time of exactly 1 minute. And by measuring the numbers of bars in 1 minute, the musician would have a solid tool to compare his tempo with that of the composer. And thus, problem solved. So you may think. If Young had solved all our tempo problems, he would be a prominent source today. But he isn't. And for a reason that I'll explain to you right now. As to give you a practical example of how he saw this simple system of counting the numbers of bars per minute, Young composed a table himself. In that table we see over 50 numbers, all representing the measured bars per minute. At the left, Young gives a list of Italian tempo words so the reader knows to what category which number belongs. And at the top we see 5 different time signatures: C, or our normal 4/4, 2/4, 3/4, 6/8 and 3/8. Interestingly, unique almost is the presence of several concrete composers. The Quantz tempi are taken from his famous treatise on playing the flute, but the presence of Quantz is more than interesting, since we see now in front of our eyes how over the course of time tempi sped up, even already around 1800. Quantz considered 40 bars in common time as allegro assai, a tempo that for Haydn and Mozart some decades later was no more than allegro, or allegro moderato even. Young used a seconds pendulum as time measurer. Below the table we see a conversion list of different units of measurements, providing the reader with all the information needed to reconstruct a seconds pendulum himself. So, with a certainty the swings would go indeed in the speed of a second. This addition made by Young shows you one thing. Not so many had a seconds clock or a seconds hand around in those days. And in musical reconstruction and tempo reconstruction especially, people often forget we are heading back in time by a few centuries. So, the idea of measuring bars per minute we find in Quantz as well. Quantz described 80 heartbeats per minute equal to 40 bars for the fastest tempo. Later in another video we'll see another illustrious name using this Quantz foundation to describe his tempo table in 1821. Johann Nepomuk Melzel. And in one of the next videos we will discuss Melzel's table connected to Quantz and Young, from which you will notice not only how the tradition evolved, but also how similar the terminology they used was and how critical it is to reconstruct the exact meaning of terms in order to get a correct understanding of those sources. But in this segment we zoom in on the Young table only. If Young isn't used often as a theoretical source, let alone for serious attempts to practically reconstruct the tempo system he published, it simply is because the resulting tempi from this table are highly problematic. Not to use the word impossible. For a normal Mozart allegro in common time, for instance, Young measured a tempo of 45 bars per minute, or in the metronome number quarter note 180. For a Pleyel allegro, he goes even as high as quarter note 240. That means that in a normal allegro tempo, so a tempo slightly higher than the middle tempo, Young must have been listening to performers playing constant rates of 16 notes a second.
So I played it very slowly, and then I got it a little quicker, bit faster, and eventually I got to 15 notes a second. That kind of thing.
15 notes a second.
I couldn't hear a single one of them because it sounds like.
Oh, I can clap 15 claps a second, right?
Just as an example to demonstrate how fast this would be, listen to this Pleyel allegro played in a normal nowadays mainstream tempo by Masha Dmitrieva on fortepiano. If Young's table is to be taken literally, this tempo is played almost half too slow, and this piece would have sounded around 1800 like this. Now, one can fill countless comment boxes here on my channel saying 16 notes per second is no problem at all. The reality of our piano keys, however, is a different one than those of a computer's iPad. And besides, I'm not the only one who raises eyebrows at the measured speeds. Young is academically accepted as a highly problematic source. A source that needs correction, even a kind of whole beat correction. In his 2013 article in Young, published in Performance Practice Review, Peter Pesek acknowledges the problematic speeds as well. Pesek offers, and perhaps for the first time officially published, a solution that is close to whole beat, namely, and I quote, Young's table interpreted literally, and he means Mozart here by the way, there should be 45 measures per minute, hence quarter note 180, which would be absurdly fast, in fact roughly twice too fast. If we reinterpret Young as giving the next to the smallest subdivision, meaning eighth notes in this case, we get quarter note 90, which is quite comfortable and in fact much less hurried than the tempi one often hears for this movement. Pesek's intuitive solution is nice to read, as it is nothing else than our WBMP solution. But as much as we love our WBMP, it cannot be applied here, since Young doesn't measure certain note values, but numbers of bars in a minute. In other words, there is nothing to subdivide in counting bars. Number of bars per minute are number of bars per minute, and since Young categorizes the time signatures, there seems nothing to interpret here either. It is clear, so many bars in 1 minute, period. And since Mr. Young was not particularly known for his sloppiness, we have to assume musicians around 1800 in the London saloons just played up to 16th notes a second in allegro movement. Meaning, for prestos they must have reached the astonishing level of about 25 notes a second. The 16th notes per second would leave players of the caliber of Lisitsa and Trifonov behind already. The 25 notes per second either confirms planet Earth was populated around 1800 with Kryptonians, or brings the case back to the study table. What's possibly wrong with it? So let's save the Superman and Supergirls for the television screens and zoom in a bit more on this fascinating tempo source. There are at least 3 directions to choose from. First option, we don't reflect about what is technically possible or not. We don't try the resulting tempi out ourselves. We simply accept the fact that in London 1800 the saloons were filled with music in speeds far beyond 16 notes a second. People back then were technically superior to us. Don't laugh too soon with this solution, since it represents today the academic standard. Klaus Mieling got his doctoral title based on a similar assumption, not questioning the tempi he proposed as historic reconstructions. Martin Noordend concluded in his 2013 article on Czerny's tempi that somehow Czerny must have been able to pull it off, where we miserably fail. And as we will see in one of the episodes in our series on the so-called durations, also the author of Alcon's Duration sees no problem at all in reporting speeds that go all the way up to 13 notes a second. It sounds good on paper, and it is remarkably well absorbed by a not too critical audience. But in reality, it solves absolutely nothing. The second option is that we consider the entire table of Young as an error, a mistake. And also this solution is applied more often than you may realize. Schumann's tempi are too fast? Then his metronome must have been broken. Beethoven's tempi are too fast? Then he had faster tempi in mind than he actually would have played himself. Mersen's description of the second pendulum doesn't make sense to us? Then the great mathematician simply made a mistake. And as with all those problems, they only are problematic to our time. Not to Mersen's, Schumann's or Beethoven's time. But hey, who bothers? We care about tempo so much that we are happy to call all the historical information on tempi simply irrelevant. Turn the page of this nonsensical position as well, I would say. So let's skip this point as soon as possible. And you too, by the way. Or we go to the option number 3, which leaves us with no other option than find a solution that works on the keys of our pianos. This is a quite revolutionary option. Really it is. It supposes that tempi given in the past actually make sense and actually are meant as tempi. The logic of that is incredibly complicated to understand, to some at least. It implies that if Beethoven gave a tempo, a metronome mark, it was actually meant as a tempo, something that you and I should be able to reproduce and try out ourselves. Too revolutionary it seems for our universities and conservatories, but nothing is too crazy for our club of hole beaters, right? But all kidding aside, how can we take a source serious that suggests speeds of 16 notes per second and higher? If Young measures so many bars per minute, that leaves no room for interpretation, right? Let's see about that. The only variable we have in this case is the minute itself. Let's visualize how Young practically could have measured the tempi. We have a musician or several musicians playing, and we have a pendulum and a pendulum watcher. You and I are pendulum watchers right now. So someone plays, someone watches the pendulum vibrations. And so now the music starts, and let's assume Young watches the pendulum as we are doing right now. Does he count every back and forth separately? So one swing to the left is 1, the following swing to the right is 2, and so on? Or does he apply the pendulum in the way Mersenne and so many others described it?
A pendulum is simply weight suspended from a pivot such that it can swing freely. A pendulum moves to and fro about a point, and hence it shows oscillatory motion. The time taken by a pendulum to complete one oscillation is called its time period. Let us calculate the time period for a given pendulum. Here we have a pendulum and a stop clock. Now we will count the time it takes to complete 10 oscillations. Swing the bob to one side and leave it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So it took 13 seconds to complete 10 oscillations.
See for the interpretation of Mersenne the video here in the info card. It's an important part of this story. After all, Young is trying to define the tempo for a certain piece. He's not interested in the literal duration of it. And Mersenne is pretty clear how to use the pendulum for tempo fixation, if that's what you're going to use it for. So let's reconstruct this Young exercise in practice. He had the seconds pendulum, so a rope of about 1 meter, as in his table would be 40 inches. Did he count 1, 2, 3, 4 till 60, or did he count 1 and 2 and 3 till 60? Mersenne did it the latter way, as did Furetière and so many others. And every time the second pendulum completed a full cycle, Young added 1 second, or one number. In this Mersenne system, 1 minute of tempo time is attained only after the duration of 2 minutes. The 1 minute is a definition of the 2 minute period. A crystal clear practical example of the Mersenne paradox. Before you smile that this isn't possible, hold your smile for a moment. We today don't count like that anymore, but it was a common practice until deep in the 19th century. Do watch that video on the Mersenne paradox if you haven't seen it already. You'll find not only the solution for the Mersenne paradox, the understanding of the concept of this so-called metrical second, but also a selection of sources till deep into the 19th century that confirm this principle time after time. You could deny that, but that's irrelevant to our cause, since it doesn't change the facts. Let me repeat a few of those quotes here. Let's start in Vienna. 1833, a handful years after Beethoven's death, and I quote, "For a pendulum to be a seconds pendulum, meaning a pendulum that gives the second exactly in one oscillation, namely going back and forth one time, it must be of a length of 3 feet 8 5/6 Paris measure, so 1 meter. See the exact same Mersenne paradox here? The duration of a full cycle of this pendulum, also 1 meter, is set equal to 1 second, but it takes 2. A few more. Peter Broodhagen, 1803. A pendulum of which the swing's oscillations, which means the swing of the rope to the left and back to the right, takes 1 second, needs to have a determined length, which Huygens has set on 3 foot 8.5 Paris lines. Again, this pendulum takes 2 seconds to complete its full cycle, not 1. You may very well think all of this is weird to read and hard to believe, but again, be careful not to let your astonishment stand in the way of seeing the naked facts. Facts that in this case are as concrete and undeniable as you may wish they are. Mersenne is being described by Klaus Mieling as wrong on the issue, as Mieling describes Furetière to be wrong on the same issue, as he declares so many others to be wrong on this issue, all authors of a time in which France delivered Europe's best minds. But fact is that Mersenne's description of the seconds pendulum, in which the time, or the tempo if you wish, of 1 second, the tempo ordinario, is defined by a duration of 2 seconds, is never questioned in history and was repeated many times. It is important to take such facts seriously, since ignoring that information doesn't help us solving time measurement methods of the past, as in this case. This way of counting the second fits perfectly in the Young and in the Melzel story. And so Young made his table while counting bars per 60 seconds, metrical seconds, exactly in the way Mersenne introduced the Galileo pendulum to music. And boom, all the tempi presented in this table are at once workable tempi, and you and I can immediately apply to the music we care about so much. Remember this, I'll repeat it often again in the future. The Beethovens and Chopins of the past wrote music for you, not with the idea to even challenge the Paulinis and Lisitsas of our time. It is also, so to speak, that double minute resulting from the metrical second that is featured so many times in treatises speaking on the metronome. Quarter note equals 60, meaning 60 quarter notes in a minute. That minute is in most cases the young minute, and if you still smile how this can be true, you should know you're mocking one of the greatest minds our past has given us. A remarkable similar attitude compared to the broken metronome story that implies a genius like Beethoven never noticed his personal gift from Melzel was wrong all the time. And now, only now, we can sit down at our pianos and actually try the young tempi out ourselves. We don't need any mysterious solution. We don't need to reject the information anymore. We, and this is exciting guys, do have at our disposal actual tempi that Jung heard around 1800 in the London saloons. And one thing you may learn from them is that the tempi in London around 1800 were still kind of similar to the Viennese tempi, perhaps a little faster, already on its way to what we've discussed recently with the 1821 London source, but still clearly belonging to the same family. And so, for the first time in history, Thomas Young is brought back to the place where he deserves to be, as a prominent voice in the reconstruction of our historical tempi. He needs to play a prominent role in the reconstructing of the authentic wishes of the composers of those days. One can ignore this or accept it, but the solution to problematic tempi as the Young table will not depend on your approval or your disapproval. The facts embody a truth which we'll have to acknowledge, no matter how much they prove our current system to be wrong. If we don't do that, we should stop pretending we are truly interested in reconstructing music of the past in an authentic way. Hope this idea inspires you to come along with us on this journey that is truly fascinating. Thanks for watching. See you soon again. Bye. If you enjoyed what you've just watched, do subscribe to this channel, hit the bell and consider supporting us on Patreon. We need all of you to continue our fascinating musical journey back in time. Thanks for watching. We see each other soon again. Bye.